Hi, my name is Rachelle Smith, entrepreneur, professional speaker, and author. Last time, I highlighted the importance of establishing a leadership legacy. Okay, what you're doing today in your leadership role is so important in terms of making sure that your leadership is always cumulative because it will ultimately end up in establishing a legacy, either a positive one or a negative one, and it's up to you to decide which one you like to pursue. This time, I actually want to talk about something that is so important. I spent an entire chapter on it in my leadership book, and that is resilience. Resilience, 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 because it doesn't matter who you are. As a leader and as a human being in general, you will have highs, you will have lows, you will have ups, you will have downs, you will have peaks, and you will have valleys. It doesn't matter who you are. And so it's so important to recognize that lesson and learn that lesson early on and learn to be persevering as well as resilient when it comes to your leadership journey. Because it doesn't matter what you may be facing today. You may be a coach and your team has struggled all season, and you basically, maybe 10 years ago, you were the state champions and you haven't been able to really kind of reestablish that legacy of leadership and winning and victory since then. And you're thinking, what in the world? You may be a physician and you feel like your patients never listen to you and they're always having all of these issues, and you figure, why am I doing this? Why am I wasting my time with people who don't care? Okay, you may be a parent dealing with children, perhaps even they're teenager, they're experiencing some type of behavioral problems or behavioral issues. Okay, you may be a teacher in the school system ready to throw in the towel because you feel that you're just not making a difference. So it doesn't matter. There are myriad different ways that leadership resilience is going to be or is required in life and in individual careers, individual lives, and leadership journeys. So that is so important. And as I just opened up this episode with a song, and you've probably heard it before, particularly if you've ever gone to Mardi Gras, called Second Line. Very common. That's just a staple of Mardi Gras, that particular song is. And I heard it on the Zydeco station on Pandora a couple days ago, and folks, and I hadn't been heard that song in a long time. Now, I'm a big fan of Zydeco music, listen to it all the time, but that particular song came on and it brought back so many memories for me. Just memories of my childhood. Because at the time, we spent some years in Biloxi, Mississippi, when my father just got out of the Navy. That was the first place that we landed. In Biloxi, Mississippi, which is an hour east of New Orleans, which is right there on the Gulf Coast, and just absolutely brought back so many memories. And of course, my brother's stationed, just retired actually from the military in Germany, and my sister's still there in Biloxi, so she's actually a Hurricane Katrina survivor. So it brought back so many memories of my childhood and Mardi Gras, and of course I grew up with the whole Cajun culture and everything, of course, even before having moved there as an adult and going to undergraduate college there. Have a whole bathroom in my house. It's kind of my Louisiana room, which is what I call it, full of LSU stuff, full of Saint stuff. And so absolute love for the culture and all things Louisiana. But as I think about this lesson of leadership resilience, and I consider my two greatest leadership role models to be my parents, Oscar and Willette Smith, who currently reside in Louisiana. But they both were born in Greenville, Mississippi, heart of the Mississippi Delta. So they spent very challenging years in, growing up, obviously, of course, during the Civil Rights Movement, during the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so my father's side, so there were 15 of them, all right? And then I had an uncle who was killed in Vietnam. And so, of course, large family. Then on my mother's side, there were 10 children, all right? So her twin died, so there were 9 of them growing up. So 15 on my dad's side, 15 children, and then, of course, the 9 remaining on my mother's side. And so my paternal grandmother was a domestic servant, cleaning houses, and that was what she did for her entire life until, she passed away in 1993. Of course, my paternal grandfather passed away in 1990. My grandmother, of course, is still living. She's in her late 80s now. We're so excited for the patriarch of the Smith family there. Still remains in Greenville, Mississippi. So she was of course had to raise all those 15 and 14 children, ultimately the one who passed away, raised all of those children, and my paternal grandfather never made more than $2 an hour. I highlighted that fact in my first book. So he spent time as a sharecropper, worked in factory jobs, basically doing whatever he had to do to support his family. So My parents both grew up in abject poverty, incredibly tough childhoods from that regard. So poverty, uh, dealing with kind of the whole civil rights movement and all of that in the heart of the Mississippi Delta, had very, 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 very adverse, conditions growing up. And so, but they did not let that kill their spirit. They did not let that diminish who they were as people. Okay, they are victims and not, they are not victims, they are victors. Even then, they were never victims, they are victors. And though that is such, when I think about my own lessons in leadership resilience, I got that from my parents. Just wonderful examples of what you can do when you persevere, when you don't take on this victim identity or victim mentality, or let the hardships of life, basically deter you and derail you, and basically kind of put a wet blanket on anything you may be trying to do in your life. So wonderful, wonderful examples. And when I think about my dad, and as I mentioned, kind of growing up in the civil rights movement, his options could have been limited if he would have allowed that. Same is true for my mother. But in 1968, my father courageously enrolled in Mississippi State University. Of course, graduated in 1972, but you can only imagine being one of a very, very, very small number of African Americans on campus in the heart of Mississippi at that time, Starkville, Mississippi, growing up and having basically kind of gone through that whole college experience, but was resilient, did not give up, did not let go of his college dream. The first person in his family to go to college, first person in his family with to go on to graduate school. And of course, he received his graduate degree from the LSU system in Louisiana. But wonderful, wonderful, wonderful example. And of course, after graduating from Mississippi State University, a year later, in 1973, enrolled in officer candidate school for the U.S. Navy. So became an officer, became the first officer in his family, and for several served in the military. Several of his siblings served in the military, but my dad was the first officer. So did not let anything derail him, was resilient, didn't give up, kept on keeping on. Same is true for my mother. And so they have served as wonderful examples for me. Of course, growing up, for me and my siblings, was wonderfully resilient role models, but also even now. And I'll be very transparent with you. This has been a very challenging several weeks for my family because my father had surgery in late May. Of course, my parents both reside in Louisiana and have been there a long time now. But my father had surgery in late May and has had some post-op complications, some minor complications. So he has been rehospitalized for 3 more times since then. And so he's actually currently in the hospital right now. Hopefully he'll be released on Tuesday. Hoping. And so, but one thing, and it's just a wonderful, even though this is a kind of unfortunate and very bad situation for him, and he's just ready to be done with going back to the hospital, going back to hospitals. His resilient spirit is so obvious and is so inspiring. And in fact, it inspired me to do this entire episode. And so my father, like I said, has been back in the hospital 3 times since his initial surgery. And so he could be in the hospital saying, why me and these people this, and why did this happen, and da-da-da-da-da-da. No, there is none of that. And my father actually told me, this is just a part of life. Things happen, obstacles happen, hardships happen. And one thing that he just, even kind of growing up, I remember him saying, I was a daddy's girl, but just, you don't worry about things you can't control. And so he's not sitting in the bed, he's not lying in the hospital bed worrying, he's not angry, he's not mad, he's not questioning, wondering why this happened to him, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Absolutely not. But that is a product, and that is a reflection of a resilient spirit. And so, folks, I don't know what you're going through today. I don't know, perhaps you're having, you may be in the hardest battle or challenge of your life. Be resilient. Don't give up. When life knocks you down, get back up, shake the dust off, and keep it moving, as they say in the vernacular. Because, think about my dad, or think about my mother, think about, anyone that you may know or have in your life that is incredibly resilient. Draw strength from that. Draw courage from that. Draw inspiration from that. Let that guide you to know that you can do the same. Okay, we all have the potential to become resilient. You think about those leaders who become great, those leaders who are effective, those leaders who have a very long tenure. They have been resilient. because it doesn't matter who you are. We will all face adversity. We will all face hardship. So it's up to us to decide how we are going to respond. Are we going to be victims, or are we going to be victors? And I assure you, if you make a commitment to remain resilient in spite of whatever comes your way, you will be successful, and your leadership journey and legacy will reflect nothing but a positive outcome. So I thank you so much for your time. Make it a wonderful day.